Welcome to the Cultivation Podcast. I am your host, Tom Hamill, and this is the Season 7 finale. Can't believe that we're already here at the last episode. It's Thanksgiving weekend here in the United States, at least when this is debuting or premiering, and so happy Thanksgiving to everybody that's watching and listening, if that's when you're watching and listening. But what an incredible journey we have gone on talking about navigating change in our life. And so this final episode is a really important one as we kind of wrap up this conversation about navigating change. And literally, the thing that I want to talk about today is navigating the change with our minds or in our minds. So let's jump into it. Throughout this season, you've heard us talk about how the change begins inside of us and we start thinking about it, visualizing it, feeling it, sensing it, long before it ever manifests itself externally or long before anybody else is aware of that change or before we go public with that change. And so there's a lot that's happening upstairs here in our minds as we go through change. So I want to talk just slightly about the neuroscience or the brain patterns, right? Or the psychological effect of change. And the first thing I just want to say right out of the bat is that our brains hate, I'm going to say that very strongly, right? Our brains hate the unknown. And literally, the automation of our brain, there's a lot of things that you do automatically without thinking about, such as breathing or blinking, right? That sort of thing. And that our brains are programmed to automate as many decisions as possible. It does this for a couple of reasons, but according to neuroscience, the number one reason brains automate is to save calories. I know that sounds funny. This one is not about a calorie deficit or a calorie conversation, but our brains are trying to not think. So instead of thinking and burning calories, it automates. So you don't think about blinking, you don't think about breathing, you don't think about growing your hair. Some of you might think about growing your hair if you're missing some, but there's a lot of things you don't think about because your brain literally is trying to not think, but to automate. Which is why a lot of times we jump to conclusions because it's like, oh, I don't have to think about that. I'm going to automate that because of past experiences, past encounters, past arguments, past conflicts, past successes, right? That the brain just stops thinking about those things and automatically assumes that whatever happened last time would happen this time, right? That's literally how our brain is programmed to automate decisions so it doesn't have to think. So when it comes to navigating change in our life and in our mind and the choices that we're making, your brain is trying to automate the things that you don't know when it comes to making this change. A lot of times what that results in when it comes to the neuroscience or the mindset of change is that it goes to the fear factor or the anxiety factor. And so we start thinking about all the things that we're going to lose, all of the things that will fall apart, all of the things that won't work. And we tend to, because it's easier to fill in the missing pieces with the negativity of what we've experienced in the past with a change that we don't fully know or understand the outcome to the change. So if you said something like, I'm going to change jobs, right? I'm just giving you a hypothetical here, but I'm going to change jobs. So I'm going to get a new job. Well, your brain starts thinking, well, what's the new boss going to be like? And what's the new pay structure going to be like? I can't go without these benefits. I can't go without, how will I learn this new craft, this new way of doing things? Your brain doesn't want to learn a new way of doing things. So you're thinking, well, that's not going to work because I know the comfort or the ease or the system of doing this. So the brain by default doesn't like change because it's trying to automate. Unfortunately, without change, we never grow, which is the second part of the neuroscience of this, that really when we go through change, what happens is our brain will grow new connections and new patterns or new pathways in our mind. So what our brain is trying to get us to not do is also simultaneously the thing the brain craves, and that is new connections, new pathways, new nerve endings, bringing dopamine and chemicals and releases all of those things that our brain wants and craves and desires. And so we have this double-mindedness, literally mindedness, that's happening inside of our brain as we are navigating change in our life. Our brain on one side is craving these new connections, these new patterns, these new neuro connections in our brain so that chemicals can reach new parts of our mind. It's craving that, but at the very same time, it is jumping to conclusions, trying to fill in the missing pieces of the unknown parts of this change that we're making. Hey, wanted to take a quick break from the podcast to let you know The Life You're Meant to Lead, #1 new release on Amazon, is available both in the ebook, right? Kindle, Audible, where I read it, and the tree version. Make sure you pick it up. It's available anywhere in the world, so you can go to your country's Amazon if you're listening or watching from somewhere else. Pick it up. The Life You're Meant to Lead by Tom Hamill. It sounds like I'm talking out of two sides of my mouth, and I kind of am, or as I would say, two sides of my brain. Why is this important for us to understand? It's important for us to understand this because on both sides of the chains, we have to take personal responsibility. This is part of maturing. And I want you to make mature decisions, mature choices, mature changes in your life. So on one side, don't be paralyzed. We heard this and we talked about this at length in our episode with Kylie of don't be paralyzed by the fear or the unknown or the anxiety of making a change. Know that your brain is trying to prevent you from making changes because it doesn't want to think about the unknown pieces, the unknown fallout, the unknown things that will never work with the change you're attempting to make. And at the same time, your brain is craving that change because with change comes new neural patterns, new learning, new growth, new connections, new highways literally on our brain that's delivering information to new pieces of our brain. So, some of us fall into two categories here. On one side, we are making change just for the sake of change without any growth. We're just changing things up because things can't stay the same. And that is an addiction in our brain for change without growth. Oh, if I just change this, I'll be happy. If I'll just change this, I'll get the delivery of the serotonin and dopamine that my mind is craving, that hit, that fix of change. And so we're just changing, but never growing. And in the other camp, there's people who will never make a change, never grow, never move outside of their box, whatever that is. And I'm not here to be critical of what your box is. I know people who are living life to the fullest, still on the same block they've lived their whole life. So don't misinterpret what I'm saying about what change needs to be. Some people need to get off that block. Other people, if you're living it to the fullest and you're growing and you're learning and you're impacting, right, stay put. But if you're in this camp of never making a change, never making a decision because of fear, because of unknown, just know that that is a trick that your mind plays on you to try to fill in those missing pieces with the unknown so it doesn't have to think about it. And you literally think yourself out of making change by imagining and filling in missing pieces you couldn't possibly know. Your brain does not know the answer to those questions yet. You haven't experienced that change. And so your mind is making it up because the brain is programmed to fill in the missing pieces to anything it doesn't know so it doesn't have to think about it. And again, if you've ever jumped to a conclusion, jump to a scenario, you had an imaginary conversation with someone or an imaginary argument with someone, knowing how they would respond to something, that's your brain filling in missing pieces so it doesn't have to think about it. So, knowing how the brain works, understanding the neuroscience of how our mind works, allows us to approach change with a more mature understanding. Oh, I do need to change this relationship. It won't be as painful, or not to say it won't be painful, but it won't be as painful. It won't be as life-ending. It won't be as impossible as my mind has made it out to be. I can take on a new job. I can do that job interview. I can enroll in that class or that course that I've always wanted. I can write that book, right? Whatever the choice or change that you are being faced with and confronted with right now internally, that maybe nobody else is even processing with you because you've never expressed it out loud, you can do this. Just know that you're going to have to take control over your mind and not allow your mind to take control over you. Just know that you're going to have to take a little bit of extra calories to think through. Is this an imaginary outcome or is this a real outcome? Is this a made-up scenario of my mind filling in the unknowns, or is this a real possibility? And here's the danger, is that with any change you make in your life, it could fall apart. But I would tell you this. I wrote this in my book. I tell this all the time. I speak about this all the time. Anytime you fail, you grow because you learn how to do it better next time. You learn how to not do it, right? It's the old famous saying of Thomas Edison, I learned 1,000 ways how to not make a light bulb, right? That is how you can choose to embrace failure when you are making changes in your life. Nobody is going to be an expert at something the first time they do it. We should expect failure. We should embrace failure, and we cannot allow the possibility of failure to let our minds control us and paralyze us from making the necessary changes we need to in our life. Because I will tell you this, the failure to make changes in your life because of fear, because of unknown, because of any of those things will result in our greatest regrets. We regret we never became that person. We regret we never took a chance on whatever that is. Being that artist, being that sculptor, being that painter, being that author, being that podcaster. I mean, again, I don't have enough time to come up with all the examples of what you could do. But what I don't want you to do is live life with regret. I would much rather have you live life with failure and growth than with regret. Regret means you stop living here, today, now. We might as well fill out your death certificate in this moment because you're choosing to live with regret because of the fear of the unknown or the fear of failure, rather than live with failure and growth and ultimately life. And so one of my former guests on another episode, Tia Wood, she's talked about this, kick fear in the face, do it afraid, right? All of those kinds of things. And so I just want to encourage you. I want to challenge you. I want you to be aware of the neuroscience of change. And I didn't even do it justice today. There's lots of other tools, other resources that you can look into as we talk about how does our mind play a role in the changes of our life, changing those relationships, changing our frequency, changing our circle of friends, changing our job, changing the scenario or the scene that we're living in. All of those things, they do have, and we talked about this in the 7 stages of grief episode, right? That we do go through the loss and the pain of it, but at the same time, there's the hope and the growth of the change that we are facing and going through. And so with that, I just want to say, thanks for joining us for Season 7. If you missed any of these episodes, go back and check them out. Go back and follow our guests. Look them up on social media. But as you do that, I want you to understand that while your brain is trying to paralyze you from change, it's also craving the change. So I would say be bold. Be the best version of yourself. Make a decision today that your future self, that the 5 year from now you would say, oh, I'm so proud of him. I'm so proud of her. They made the necessary change when it was time, even though they were afraid, even though they were with anxiety, even though it seemed scary at the time. They made the change. They had the courage. They had the guts. They had the strength to do it. They did it. And look at who you've become. Your future self will be proud of you. And the last thing I would say is that the world is waiting for you to make that change to inspire the rest of us. So be the change. Be the change in this world. Be the change in your world. Don't let your mind keep you from being the change that the rest of us are waiting for so that we can be awakened to our possibilities while we watch you be awakened to yours. Thanks for being a part of this episode, this season of the Cultivation Podcast. I am your host, Tom Hamill, and this is the season finale of Season 7. Thanks again. Thanks for checking out this week's episode. Be sure to hit the like button as well as make your comments in the comment section. We'd love to hear from you and journey with you. Also, hit the subscribe button so that you don't miss out on all the other incredible content we have coming at you.